Hello and welcome into another edition of the BTN U Indiana Volleyball Show. I'm Griffin Epstein alongside Jackson Kinney. Since we last talked about the Indiana volleyball team, the Hoosiers have dropped 2 matches in a row, both at home at Wilkinson Hall. The Hoosiers first dropped a heartbreaker to Maryland, blowing a 2-0 lead and then having 7 match points in the 5th set, but being unable to convert on any as they dropped their second match of the season to Maryland after blowing a 2-0 lead. Things would get worse for Indiana as they fell to Ohio State 3-1 on Saturday night with their best player Brianna Edwards out with plantar fasciitis. Indiana now falls to 13-16 on the season and 2-14 in the Big Ten. The Hoosiers are tied for last place in the Big Ten, along with Northwestern and Rutgers. Well, Jackson, it was a disastrous weekend for Indiana. What went wrong after so much hope after that Rutgers victory?
Well, I just want to point out the 2 teams we're tied for last with, or Indiana's tied for last with, Northwestern and Rutgers. Indiana beat them in a game, so really, is Indiana last? But anyway, against Maryland, they were up 2-0, as we mentioned, and then they blew the 2-0 set lead. And that's just kind of been the story. They've done that a lot this year, and I think they just got tired of the first 2 sets. Look at Brianna Edwards, who had the school record 39 kills in that match. I mean, they couldn't get any offensive creativity going. There was no real passing around other than to Brianna, who with her big arm and got 39 kills, which is amazing. I mean, it's just not going to be enough. You can't rely on one player to do that, especially when it's a match that goes 7 match points in the 5th set.
Yeah, and the Hoosiers have their opportunities not just in that 5th set, but also in the 3rd set. They took a 2-0 lead as they did last time against Maryland in College Park. Went up 7-2 in the 3rd set. Everyone in Wilkinson Hall thought they had a victory, but Maryland kind of changed their strategy. They keyed in on Brianna Edwards, and the Hoosiers didn't have any other options offensively, and that cost them.
Right, the 5th set this year for the Hoosiers has just kind of been cursed, really. I mean, they lost to Purdue in a close game that way, and there's so many examples. I'm not even going to start listing them.
Two match points blown to Iowa would probably stand out.
Right, and I mean, they were even out-hitting the Terps in that game for the first time, out-hitting anybody in a long time with how sloppy the offense has been error-wise, and they just couldn't capitalize on that. And then, as we mentioned, Brianna Edwards, 39 kills. The next night against Ohio State, if you want to get into that, where they lost 3-1, she had a foot injury and couldn't play against Ohio State. And then Deja Lofton was also set out for that game on the bench. And when you play that many overtime sets in a 5-set game, you're going to be tired. You're missing 2 of your stars. And just the 3-1 loss shouldn't really be that big of a surprise for this team.
Yeah, I mean, the Saturday night, Indiana did just look at energy, but it looked almost to be more mental than physical at times. This team has been through the rigor this year. They've had so many tough losses. Coach Aird has said, we're just looking towards the next match. We're going to forget about it. And it seemed like this team was staying positive even through this 9-game losing streak. But, man, that Maryland loss felt like a gut punch. You could feel the fans even on Saturday night felt like they were almost at a funeral or something like that. There was not a good atmosphere at Wilkinson Hall. It has to be hard for Indiana to try to keep its head up right now.
Blowing set leads like that, especially 2-0, which they've done a couple of times this season, that takes a lot out of you. That takes a lot out of you mentally. It hurts. And when that keeps happening, it's going to wear down the morale so much. And I think at this point, they're just frustrated, and yeah, they have short memories, and Coach Aird preaches that a lot, looking ahead to next match and just focusing on that. And they do a good job of that. I mean, they did take Maryland 5 sets and almost won that game. No matter how the match ended up, they almost won it. You can't take that away. But almost won it's not going to be good enough, and you have to be able to look past that frustration in those games.
Yeah, and you look at IU, I mean, they could be close to 500 in Big Ten play with how well they've played in some close games if things went a little bit differently, which head coach Steve Aird has repeatedly said. But in the end, you have to find a way to win, and they're not doing that right now. And they got 4 games now left in their season. They play Penn State on Wednesday. They have Michigan State as well twice, a team that has struggled of late, lost 9 out of 10. What can they do, Jackson, both mentally and on the court, offensively and defensively, to have any shot at getting a win that would be nice for this team?
Well, getting one against Penn State is going to be difficult because they are a top 10 team in the nation, and they're one of the top teams in the Big Ten. And against those teams, Indiana hasn't played great, but that's just because they're one of the best teams in the country they're going up against. But I think against Penn State, the biggest thing is going to be playing solid, playing the game they know. I mean, they switched from the 5-1 formation in the last game to the formation they started the year with. So I think against Penn State, even just taking a set's going to be huge for the morale. Winning or losing that game, even 3-1, that would be a good moral victory if they keep all of those sets close, especially against a team like Penn State. Now against Michigan State at home, I mean, they're struggling right now. They've lost 9 of their last.
IU's now Michigan State's lost 9 out of the last 10. Yeah,
Right.
4-8.
So they've lost 9 of the last 10. They're coming in struggling as well. That's a very winnable game against Michigan State. And if you can win that, get another conference win under your belt going into the last 2 games, maybe you have some momentum to carry out towards the end of the season and taking into the offseason before next year.
That'd certainly be huge. Let's take a look at that schedule going forward as Indiana takes on Penn State Wednesday at Wilkinson Hall, 8 p.m. Penn State, number 8 in the country. IU was swept in State College when those teams played last month. They'll then take on Michigan State on Sunday. It'll be senior night for 7 seniors, so an emotional afternoon for certain. And as we mentioned, Michigan State comes in struggling. Maybe it's a winnable game for IU. The Hoosiers will then head on the road for their final 2 games of the season the weekend after Thanksgiving. They take on Michigan, as you could see, at 7 Friday night in Ann Arbor. The Wolverines rank number 23 in the country. That's the only time those teams will face off this year. And then IU will place Michigan State one final time this season in their final game of the season, 8 p.m. Saturday night in East Lansing. That's the schedule coming up for IU, and we will not have another show until after those 4 games are over, as we have Thanksgiving break coming up. So we'll be taking a 1-week hiatus before our next show in 2 weeks. We're going to have a recap of the entire Indiana Hoosier volleyball season. For Jackson Kinney, I'm Griffin Epstein, and we'll see you next time.